Welcome to Pancakes and Politics Overdrive, presented by PNC Bank. Today's broadcast is set in Detroit's jewel, the North End, at Greater New Mount Moriah Baptist Church. Today's sponsor remarks will be presented by Jeff Donofrio, President and CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Pancakes and Politics Overdrive. Business Leaders for Michigan is proud to partner with the Michigan Chronicle and with Hiram Jackson on bringing these important conversations to you. The individuals that you'll see in just a few minutes and the topics that are presented really represent the future of Michigan. What we need to do to become a better state, a more competitive state. Our members, including those who are really from the largest employers, the largest universities in our state, are laser focused on how we make Michigan a top 10 state. They represent 40% of our state's economy, 500,000 employees, and more than $1 trillion of investment in our state. At Business Leaders for Michigan, we feel very strongly that our state's future is bright, that together we can make any problem disappear. That's why we've issued the Compete to Win plan, our plan for the state of Michigan, how we become a top 10 state. We hope you'll take a look at businessleadersformichigan.com. And again, thank you for joining today. Stay tuned for an important conversation.
Good afternoon. This is Pastor Kenneth James Flowers, Greater New Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist Church. I want to welcome you to the Jewel on the North End, our banquet and conference center here, as we have an affordable housing discussion sponsored by the Knight Foundation, the Michigan Chronicle, and hosted by the NSO, the Neighborhood Service Organization. To our moderator, Brother Ken Coleman, to Linda Little, the president of the NSO, to Senator Adam Hollier, as well as to Chad Benson from MISTA. I want to first of all welcome all of you to Greater New Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist Church, to our Jewel in the neighborhood, Jewel on the North End. As we talk about affordable housing, let me first of all say that Greater New Mount Moriah, our 501c3 Mount Moriah Community Development Corporation, is trying our very best to create affordable housing. We've had some challenges though, because we have property, we have land, we have buildings, but we don't have the resources. We are striving to get resources to partner with us to build affordable housing on the North End. So we thank God that Chad Benson is here from MISTA to help us, hopefully and prayerfully, and to help others in the North End be able to get tax credits or whatever we need to do to create affordable housing. This is a crisis in America. It's a crisis in Detroit. It's a crisis in urban communities to make sure that people are able to live in affordable housing. So I thank God that we're here today to talk about this issue, to bring it to the forefront, and to let people know that we need to work together to make this a reality. So I thank my friend, my brother, Brother Hiram Jackson from Real Time Media and the Michigan Chronicle. I thank God for him for being a great advocate for affordable housing, a great advocate for the North End, and for doing all he can in Detroit. I thank the Knight Foundation for coming here to Greater New Mount Moriah Baptist Church, allowing us to host you today. So once again, welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's take it to the streets. Let's build affordable housing. Let's make the North End what it really is, a jewel in the city. God bless you, and may heaven smile upon you. God bless.
Thank you so much, Pastor Flowers. It's always great to be in the beautiful and God-filled edifice of Greater New Mount Moriah. Lots of history on the incredible North End, and we'll talk about the North End and the entire city, the 139 square miles of the great city in which we live. I'm Ken Coleman, senior reporter at the Michigan Advance. We are a Lansing-based public policy and politics news site, and it is my esteemed pleasure to help kind of guide or moderate today's very important conversation. And you will hear more, obviously, from this esteemed panel, to be sure. But I wanted to open up in a very intentional way with the great leader of the Neighborhood Services Organization. She's Linda Little, serves with great vigor at that organization as president and CEO. And Linda, I guess probably the first question, the leading question to kind of help us get started in this robust conversation, why are we here today?
That is a great question, and it is a good one to start with. But first, I want to thank Pastor Flowers for hosting us in this beautiful facility today and for opening for us. I want to thank you, Ken, for agreeing to moderate, Senator Hollier, Mr. Ala Young, and Chad Benson, our partners at the City of Detroit, our wonderful Lieutenant Governor from the Governor's Office for answering the call when I reached out and said, hey, we've got this real problem, and it's becoming a crisis here in Detroit. Affordable housing is not affordable. It is affordable for a subsection of Detroiters who are in the middle to upper middle class, but for the lower class of workers in Detroit, and I hate to say lower class because we're all Detroiters and we're all one Detroit.
Sure.
But as it relates to finances and income, they are at the lower tier of the income levels. You know, the normal, people who wait tables at your favorite restaurants, the people who work at Target, Meijer.
Folk that we called essential workers.
Folks that we call essential workers during the pandemic. Affordable housing for that subset of our wonderful Detroit. Housing's not affordable for them. And at NSO, we are a community development organization. We do real estate development. Housing solutions is what we do in addition to healthcare and meeting the needs of vulnerable populations. So as a safety net organization in our community who has a portfolio of a full continuum of housing solutions, we are on the ground and at the precipice of issues related to housing. And what I am seeing is that there is a growing population of people who are families, children, people who go to work every day, who just don't have secure housing.
Well, I didn't want to stop you, but I think it's important. We talk in my business, in the media business, that's the lead.
That's the lead.
Say it one more time.
There is a growing population of people in Detroit who go to work every day, who have families, couples, women, children going to school, who did not have a place to lay their heads the night before, who go in and the teachers are seeing that they have been sleeping in a car or sleeping in a stoop outside of a church, that this population is growing. The demand for housing is growing. The units for housing is shrinking. At NSO, we have long had contracts and partnerships with landlords in the community who help us to house what our rapid rehousing or transitional housing programs, where we house people for up to a year while we help them get gainful employment, more stable, permanent housing. Those relationships are shrinking because the market demands that they can charge much more than what we're contracted to pay. And so we are not having the ability to place as many people in housing because the rent that landlords are demanding, which is market rents, we can't afford to pay. Because we get paid through MSHDA, through HUD, through grants, the city, and the money that we get to pay those rents is not at the level that they're demanding that we pay. So the difference, the gap is increasing about 30% now.
Well, that's a great, you've crystallized this issue, to be sure. And we've got an esteemed panel with us to kind of talk about this for the next little bit. And I want to get into that. The historian in me always wants to look toward, very important panel. Everybody here is important, but I'm interested, Linda, piggybacking on what you're open. I want to talk to Brother Ala Young for a minute because he is what the current term, Senator Hollier, is legacy Detroiter. It means Detroit been here for a little bit,
Been
right?
here.
Been here for a minute.
Parents was here, came here, had a story that started with came from the South for opportunity,
That's
trying to
right.
get away from racism.
Great migration. I think Brother Young speaks to a lot of that. Just for a couple minutes, because we're going to get into a bigger discussion. But Brother Young, just give me about 2 minutes of your story, your family story. How did you end up here, and why are you here?
Okay, well, first of all, my father and brother were both politicians. My dad was Young Senior, my brother Jones Jr., state senator and state representatives. I grew up with a two-family home, educated in a Catholic school system. Had difficulties in my life, was living on the street, spending time in Belle Isle, in the shelter system. I was in like 7 shelters. And thanks to the great work of the NSO, I found a home where I could retransition from the street and the shelter life to permanent residency. Having said that, we talk about affordable housing.
Yeah.
For instance, I've been successful in making the transition from the street to the shelters in the permanent residency. Let's just say I lived there for a while, and my rent's being subsidized, like she said. So I don't pay rent out of my pocket.
I see.
Now, say if I wanted to move after I feel comfortable, and I feel I made a transition to mainstream again, I can't afford to leave because I couldn't afford the rent.
Wait, say that last part again. After all the history that your family's had in this city, the good work that you've done in this city as an individual, you're saying it's hard for you to afford to live in the city?
Where I live now?
From a if you wanted to buy a home.
We're talking about rent.
Renting a home. Yeah.
It'll be difficult because of what the fees are to pay rent. My fees are subsidized now.
Yes.
So let's just say, after a while, I decide, well, I made a transition. I'm comfortable now to be a participant in society. I can't afford to move because I couldn't afford the rent.
Yeah.
So in a way, I'm stuck. Not that I'm not stuck, but the reality would be I would be stuck. And I enjoy where I'm at. But if that changed, it'd be difficult for me to make the transition to living outside Claire Apartments.
So that is an important point, and I want to move to our other panelists. Certainly want to go to Chad Benson at MSHA.
Sure.
He is the Director of Development there. State government can be sort of an alphabet soup. And so in Chad's response, I want him to break out that acronym, what MSHA is,
Sure.
and what you've heard so far, particularly from Mr. Young. How does your agency respond to that type of concern?
Sure. So, so the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, we're a part of the state government. We're an agency part of the state government, and we're the housing finance agency for the state. So our mission is really affordable housing, using the resources we have as a state to best combine them to create affordable housing that's going to provide the opportunities for the people that need them. And we know that the need throughout the state, like Linda mentioned, has never been greater all throughout the state in terms of the need for affordable housing, and making sure that there's housing that is not putting people in a position where they're overburdened with all the other costs that they have as a part of their life. Making sure that their rent payment or their mortgage payment is not so significant that they can't afford to, have the opportunities as part of their life.
The agency creates opportunities,
That's
looks
right.
to create opportunities.
That's right, yeah. So we have a lot of resources and programs within our agency that we essentially use to try to create housing that is, it's either creating vouchers, in order to directly help pay for somebody's rent, making sure that they're not paying more than 30% of their income towards their rent, so they're not overburdened, or creating units that are essentially affordable, so they're restricted at certain rent levels and they're restricted for people at certain income levels. And those programs have been very successful in doing that. And even within those programs, we try to be very intentional. We look at the data throughout the state and the needs throughout the state, and we talk to a lot of the communities and the people on the ground that are living it to be able to sort of understand, how do we create units that are meeting those deep needs? Because we know that there's need across the spectrum, but there's a ton of need at the very low incomes, and there's not a lot of options for those households. So there's a lot of need there, and really trying to focus those resources. I think the challenge, and it's a growing challenge, like Linda was mentioning, is the amount of need that's out there. We have a lot of resources, but there's a lot of demand on those resources because of the great need that's there. So from the perspective of somebody who's looking to get themselves into a good housing situation, going from a place where maybe they're homeless and now they're housed, that's a great first step. But you're right, there's a challenge of just continuing affordability throughout the spectrum, and we do work on all those levels. But there's more need than there is the sort of the resources and the ability to create the units. So it's a challenge that we deal with every day. We recognize it, and as a state, we're putting more resources towards it. But there's a lot of need there for sure.
And Ken, I just have to echo that, because we've done a lot of great things in Detroit to help, bring more affordable housing, and a lot of progress has been made.
Sure.
And I have to commend the mayor, Mishta, the Housing Revitalization Department, a lot of the developers who are committed to this, our great Senator Adam Hollier. There's been a lot of support and effort around helping to advance affordable housing in Michigan, and especially in Detroit, with gentrification. And there's been a real deliberate effort to try to have greater housing. But the issue is, and the reason why we wanted to have this panel, and I reached out to Senator Hollier and Chad and Mr. Young and Lieutenant Governor and Julie Schneider and Don Rencher, who are really hands-on on this issue, is because there's a hidden group of individuals that are being left out of these strategic efforts. And that's what we want to talk about today. Those folks, those essential workers.
Yes.
The Mr. Youngs who cannot afford the rents, that 30% AMI, the 30%
And that's
income.
a standard, Chad,
That's
right?
the
That's the
standard.
standard
So if you
industry
take an
standard.
average essential worker, let's say they make $15 an hour, that's about $30,000 a year. So 30% of that income, that's about $9,000 a year in rent. That's about $700. I'm doing the math in my head. So right.
You're better than me.
That's $700 a month in rent.
Yeah.
Where can you find units to rent for that amount?
We're gonna talk, right? Let's get right into it. I think we've opened this in a way that everybody kind of understands. Who's on the panel understands the issue, the importance of the issue. The reason why I wanted to in the first round, if you will, talking to my good friend, Senator Adam Hollier from Detroit, let's talk about this from a state perspective. You are one of 38 men and women who represent constituencies throughout the state. One of 38. Now let's do a little bit more geography. In Michigan, Mr. Benson's organization has to service 83 counties. Michigan is a big place. We're in 10 million people. But we're talking about Detroit today. Let's deal with a little bit of the elephant in the room, Senator Hollier. Detroit's different than other municipalities in those 83 counties, right? Let's deal with what's happening right now. Let's deal with rising housing prices, which is a byproduct that can be renting costs, right? Let's deal with gentrification. Let's deal with this city is starting to look very different in a lot of communities than it did 10 or 20 years ago. And you sit in a unique seat. Your state Senate seat, you represent multiple communities throughout Wayne County, Detroit being the biggest of it, but you represent communities that are as affluent as the Grosse Points, communities that are coming back, to be sure, as Pastor Flowers talked about, North End, but for a couple decades, maybe more, had been challenged. Things are looking very different out here on the North End. You live in the North End.
Was born in the North.
Born in the North
Raised
End.
here.
So talk to me. Let's get right at it, man. Why can't people afford rents in Detroit right now?
Because our system has not been designed to work for people who live in the city of Detroit, right? So when we talk about our housing stock, it was primarily built after World War II nationally, and particularly as we talk about spaces and communities that are growing. But the housing stock in the city of Detroit, particularly that we would quote unquote say is affordable, was built for factory workers, right? And so imagine you built factory worker housing 100 years ago.
Mr. Ford.
And it was affordable in the neighborhood. It was affordable in those spaces, but it did not get the reinvestment that you saw in some of these suburban communities. It did not get that same level of maintenance, and people's homes have not increased in value, right? So my wife and I bought our house in the neighborhood right up the street 11 years ago now, and people were like, why are you buying the money pit? And it has cost us a lot to fix, and we still fixing and working on it and doing all those kind of things. But by and large, people who have homes in the city of Detroit, until just recently, their housing value did not increase. And because the value of their house was not increasing, they didn't get any equity. So they weren't able to get a loan to invest in purchasing, to renovating, to doing some of those kind of things.
And they're getting property tax bills that are like off the charts.
Extreme, you know. And so as we talk about why that's so important, because when we talk about affordability, when we talk about being in this space, the median income in the city of Detroit is $33,000, right? If you're making $15 an hour, you're making $30,000. So it says what income looks like in the city of Detroit. And we start talking about what new housing is. I sit on the board of Vanguard, which is a community development corporation in my neighborhood that has built housing. You cannot build housing for people who live in the city of Detroit, who have lived in the city of Detroit, unless it's heavily subsidized. So what kind of housing do you see? You see housing that is built for folks who are abjectly poor and people who are seniors, because there are federal programs that provide that level of funding and that level of support. You see some developers who are starting to say, well, how can we build gap funding? And so that is funded by organizations like the Knight Foundation, who is supporting this panel, who have invested heavily in the North End and are saying, hey, we're going to be all in to make sure that people who are from a community can live in a community, can live in a neighborhood. But federal government, state government, we haven't figured out a good way to fill the gap of how do you fund being able to live in a neighborhood?
Well, talk to me, and I want to get back certainly to and certainly Mr. Young, and certainly Ms. Little. I mean, to the extent y'all want to jump in, I want to have a little bit of a policy discussion for a couple minutes,
absolutely,
particularly with Chad and Senator Hollier. So the little bit that I know about covering government. Lots of money comes from Washington, federal money. It's the process, we call it in the business, is a pass-through, right? Yep. Your body votes on money that comes from D.C. for initiatives and the like. MISTA actually, after the legislature appropriates the money, you allocate the money. That's right. Why is this the group in the middle out there kind of in the lurch? I mean,
that's why we're having this panel, because we've never had this conversation. The conversation has always been, there are people who are homeless, and there are this number of people homeless.
In a great constituency
we talk about poverty, right? And so we use the federal poverty guidelines, right? But every program, if someone is 150% eligible, because the poverty line is too low. We talk about who needs affordable housing. That line is so low that when you talk about who's homeless, the state says that there are 50,000 people are homeless, because that means that you have literally not had a home for a single day in the last 365 days. So if Linda's cousin, who has been homeless for the last 6 months, is out and there is a torrential storm, and he's like, well, can I just spend the night?
Might be the Gaylord tornado. Right?
Yeah, can I spend the night, one night? Starts his clock all over again to get into the programs that she provides people with. So when we talk about people who are getting permanent supported housing, these are people who have been legitimately homeless, no roof over their heads for a full year, and there are thousands of people on the waiting list for those programs. So because that need is so high, because we have done such a poor job managing people who are subsisting, we haven't started to talk about people in the space of, like, they go out to work every day and they have 3 roommates, or the mom who is working who has 2 kids, maybe nuclear family, right? Mom, dad, husband, 2 kids, can't sustain themselves, right? So we talk about what it takes to be in the space. And so if you ask Chad what the affordability wage was in Wayne County, you would be shocked. Because less than half of the people in the city are making that, because there are not very many housing options that are being done for that. And we aren't building housing in that space because we haven't talked about it. And the reason that we haven't talked about it is because it hasn't hit the kind of people who it's relevant to.
Well, so that's a great. I mean, I appreciate that, and I think our viewers will certainly too. You're certainly talking from the public policy standpoint. I remember this young man when he's a Detroit public school student. I was managing the citywide student council. I feel so proud that he is in Lansing representing us. Good brother. Chad Benson from Mischa. So you've heard what Senator Hollier has said. Mm-hmm. What is your organization? What is your organization's legislative team? What are you advocating for in respect to what we're talking about today?
Yeah. So I mean, a lot of the traditional programs that we think of when we think of affordable housing, the low-income housing tax credit, tax-exempt bonds, HUD programs like home funding and things like that, they do hit those AMI levels that are 60%.
AMI again,
area median income,
and that means that's a formula.
It's a formula. Yep. It's a formula. Every county has their own area median income, formula, and it's a HUD-driven formula.
Housing,
but essentially,
urban development out of DC.
Yep, it's essentially, describing what the area median income for that county is, and the low-income housing tax credit program, the way it's set up, is the resource can really be used to develop housing units that are at 60% of the area median income and below. And so 60% of area median income for a two-person household in the city of Detroit, I think, is about $40,000. So it's right in that middle ballpark there.
So all money is good money.
But hear that number. Yeah, $40,000 median income in the city of Detroit, $33,000, which means that half of people are eligible for this program. There is not some way that we are going to build affordable units for more than half of the city's population. And that is assuming that they have one child, right? That's a household of one. And so how many folks do you know who are making $40,000 and under who have more than one person that they are taking care of, whether that be a child or an adult who isn't working, a senior, a mother, grandparent, aunt, uncle? We live in generational housing, and it's not adequate. It ain't happening.
That is. You do see that a lot in Detroit, but all four of y'all are probably better at math than I am. What's the 15? And there's a lot of debate about paying certain essential employees $15 an hour. Mm-hmm. What's the $15 an hour salary?
$30,000. So again, people are fighting for $15 an hour, which is saying you are fighting to live in subsidized housing, right? So to put that in perspective, we all remember shows like The Jeffersons and Good Times and things like that, right? And so you got a good job, you're able to do some of those kind of things. People are saying, hey, I work all day, I should have a good job, and they are asking for $15 an hour because that is a significant increase to what they have. But that still makes them eligible for programs that we know we don't have enough slots in because we have way too many people who are saying the best I can do in the near term does not allow me to provide the minimum standard. And so your wife and I are working on these poverty solutions.
Tim Trent from the Department of Labor and Economic Development.
Yes, see, that's how you know a good husband, right? Like he's like, my wife has a name, and she has a title, and she does good work. And so I work with her on this task force where we are talking about holistic solutions to these problems, and so many of them start and end with housing because housing for the low income is an important caveat, but as you transition up out of hey, these are people who are eligible for AMI, it's like, well, the most valuable thing you own is probably your house, right? And so if people like Linda are not able to buy a house that accrues in value, she's not starting her business that is going to hire someone that makes $20 an hour, right? Every millionaire and billionaire starts their story with, well, I really pulled myself up working in, starting my company in my parents' garage. Well, how many houses in this neighborhood have garages? Spoiler, not many.
And then and then I have to add to that. So if that average, the AMI is 40,000, and we're talking about the fight to get people to be paid
Hello.
$15 an
Hello.
hour, which is 30.
Starting from a deficit.
Which is 30. So what are they making? So we know that that group that's fighting is making less than $15 an hour. They cannot afford houses with the AMI of $40,000. That 30% is well out of their reach.
Well, I want to go back to my good friend, Brother Young, legacy Detroiter, long-term Detroiter, and I see that Young family resemblance now. I see.
Thank you.
I covered both father and son in the Michigan State House in the 90s. So you've heard a lot of this, and you know this issue.
Of course.
Heard a lot of acronyms, AMI, MISHDA. I mean, how do brothers and sisters in the community, how are they responding to what they see, they realize is a challenge, they're living the challenge, but how are they responding to, what's going on with government? Why can't we solve this? Why can't government, great nonprofits like NSO, great foundations like Knight, why can't we solve this? Do you hear that on the street?
Not only do I hear that, but the problem is they feel that they're not important.
They feel like they're not important.
Because even the conversations I just heard, none of that, you were talking about my situation, period. I don't make $30,000 a year. If I just, like I said, I've come a long way in my transition. So now I look in terms of my future, maybe I want to live in a better place. I can't afford to do that.
Okay.
So they talk about,
So there's a group of people that are even coming in lower than.
and they don't feel included in the process. And see, if you don't feel included, your drive, lessens, your initiative lessens, because you feel like no matter what I'm going to do, I'm going to be stuck in this place, even though I made, transitions in life, but it doesn't go anywhere. I'm still at a level where I'm less than, and that's humbling.
How do we solve it, Senator Hollier?
I need you to hear that.
Yeah, no, I do. Yeah.
What he just said, I need everybody to hear that. And that is why I called for this discussion, because they are being left out. That is what I'm seeing. And they're being displaced, not just left out, they're being displaced in the city that they love, have grown up in, have been here for generations, paid their dues. And I know that's not the intent of anybody sitting here.
Right. It's the reality,
It's the reality, but that's not the intent. And so we have to match our behaviors to what we really want, which is to not leave any Detroiters behind.
Well, can we talk about engagement? I think that's a great jumping off point, Linda, to go to where I wanted to go to next. And I think all of you in your various positions have a role to play in that. Worked on a story this morning, Senator Hollier, about the Detroit Public Schools bolstering its civic engagement effort. Bolstering its civics engagement by encouraging civic engagement. When you go to the coffee houses and when you meet with neighborhood or organizations in your community and you talk about this issue, what are you saying to them about the opportunity that they have or may not have, and we might need other help, but what are you saying to them about, okay, we know the situation that exists, right? How do we change it?
I think for me, I have always lived in the space of I represent a community that needs things. They don't need me to talk. They don't want to hear me talk. They want me to walk in and say, hey, I heard you, and I am delivering. So when I first got elected, I went over to NSO and said, hey, what can I do? And they said, well, this is the largest permanent supported housing in the state. And we would have done more if MISHDA would have let us. And that was not this current MISHDA, so Chad's not, not throwing him over there. They have supported a second permanent supported housing. Yes. But we had a strategy for years that said, hey, you're homeless, and you've been homeless for a year, and we already talked about what that meant. I think in 6 months, you should be back on your feet. And so we're going to get you back in this thing, but you can only stay for 6 months. It has been a push to say, all right, we're going to do permanent supported housing. Once you get into this space, you have dignity. Right? You have a space that you can call your own. You will never be displaced from. You can build your space from here. This is where you live. This is your neighborhood. This is your community. And we're building another permanent supported housing, right, with the Ruth Ellis Center. And to say time and time again, we are not building permanent spaces. This is not a lease. You are not getting a time card that you have to check out for in 6 or 9 or in 10 months or 12 months. This is where you live. And as long as you want to be here, this is yours. You're never going to be priced out. You're never going to be pushed out. You live here. And so we got to say that to people.
The engagement piece.
And then we have to say, where do you want to live? Because we have a bunch of seniors, and the mayor has done, I think, an excellent job trying to value that with senior buildings, right? And say, hey, y'all seniors, y'all live, you lived here forever, you live here for whatever. But if you live in a house, if you live in a neighborhood, if you live in a community, we have not started to transition the building and the space to say, all right, well, you grew up in this neighborhood, we're going to give you a development in this community.
Because you know Detroiters, oftentimes they put roots down. They want to
I can't tell you. You talk about neighborhoods. I grew up 4 blocks from here. I went to elementary school 3 blocks from here. I live 4 blocks away. Do you know how many times people tell me I'm not from this neighborhood? They're like, man, you grew up on the other side of because I grew up, I was born and raised on the west side, live on the east side. They're like, you're not from here. I was like, bro, I can see my parents' house. So people need a hyper-focused situation where you can say, man, I grew up in Brightmoor. I want to live in Brightmoor. I don't want to live in Rosedale Park. I don't want to live in Grandmont. I don't want to live in these other places. I am from Coney Gardens.
Because a lot of people assume that you want to go someplace.
Coney Gardens is my neighborhood. I want to be able to stay in Coney Gardens.
Linda, what has NSO done in that regard? I just mean in terms of the engagement. We know a beautiful track record, to be sure. We know it. Let's talk about engagement on this issue.
So first,
you reached out to the
I'm
senator.
a native Detroiter.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm born and raised on the east side of Detroit. Lived in Palmer Woods. Rooted in Detroit. I've worked in Detroit. I've choose to work in Detroit with my people here in Detroit. And this issue is something that is reflective of what we do at NSO. I'm sitting here with our state senator, the director at MISTA, and our resident at the Clay apartment, Mr. Young. This is my colleague here. This is my colleague. This is engagement. We have other residents in NSO services that are here that are going to talk to the audience as well. And so that is how you create solutions. Bring the people affected by your decisions to the table. Hear their perspective. It's really important that we listen to their voices. And they have, and that's just leadership. You know, when you're running an organization, when you're trying to create solutions, hear from your frontliners. Listen to what they have to say, because they have a perspective that we don't have as leaders.
Absolutely.
We're trained to look at the big picture. You're looking at the state's issues. You are as well, multiple counties. And so they have a unique perspective. Their voice is important. They have to be heard. We have all these ARPA dollars that have come in, the CARES Act funding.
And that's the money coming after the pandemic, federal money coming after the
federal money from the pandemic. We have a great opportunity here to not only help change the landscape of how we develop housing in Detroit to provide some real solutions for everyone, but we also have this really tremendous opportunity to transform the lives of so many people, because we are on the brink of a housing crisis. This demand for housing and emergency shelter is growing at a rate that I've never seen before. And if you look at the statistics, it's going to show a different number. It's not going to capture this transient homeless population that we're talking about, because they're sleeping in the car, as Senator Hollier mentioned. They stayed at their cousin's house the night before. You're not capturing this but we see it. We feel it, because we're helping to house them on an emergent basis.
And let me just jump in on that. And so as we talk about that, the reason that's so important is because people were incredibly generous during the pandemic. So people you would not normally let stay at your house or operate in these spaces, you let come hang out. That generosity is going away. The evictions are coming back. So we're getting crunched on both sides as we talk about where people do or do not have housing.
Well, as we get ready to move into our next segment, I want each of you to think about this and respond in a minute or so, a minute and a half. We've said a lot of important things, and maybe it's reiterating something that you said earlier, but we are an 83 county state. You work with men and women every day, Senator Hollier, where you've got to find ways to get legislation you want passed
by helping somebody else in another community. It seems to me, y'all, this is just about people, right? It's not even necessarily a Detroit thing as much as it's about helping Michiganders. Give me, as we go into the next segment, give me a minute on this thing is important, right? It's bigger than us, or it's bigger than maybe even the North End or the city of Detroit.
I think everyone across the state can tell you about how housing is unstable in their neck of the woods, right? When we talk about kids who aren't able to go to school because they don't have stable housing at home, people who can't live in communities, right? So my rural colleagues, day in and day out, they are talking about people moving because there are not opportunities, because property values aren't going up, they can't buy a house, they can't do any of those kind of things. This is not a city of Detroit only problem, but if we don't find a solution that is centered on the city of Detroit, then it's not going to work for the residents that we have. It's something I've been really working hard to accomplish, and something we've got to do, something we've got to push our dollars into to make sure that the next generation of homeowners are able to purchase, and that development happens at the hyper-local level. So people who are in a neighborhood like this, like the pastor, like people like Sonia Mays can say, hey, I want to develop in my neighborhood, and we're going to get the dollars and the resources, and we can do it. That's what we're focused on doing right now.
Chad Benson of Michigan.
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, I think what I've sort of done is describe a little bit of some of the basics of the programs that we have. I can tell you that, you know, from our perspective, we're always looking at how do we make those programs work to really fit the needs that are the specific needs, because there's a lot we can do within those programs. And it is a recognition that need exists from the very, very low income all the way up to the essential workers and beyond. I mean, we're talking about, missing middle and workforce housing, you know, throughout the state, and the needs that are there as well. So there's a lot of need that exists. And I just, the engagement piece of it, you know, that really struck. I mean, we're getting to the point where we're finishing up a statewide housing needs study and our statewide housing plan. That is really, you know, going to talk about, not just from a MSHDA standpoint, but as a state standpoint, what's the housing plan, what are the needs, and how do we sort of tackle those needs? Because it really does involve collaboration. I mean, it involves, you know, all the seats at the table to really figure out how to do that. And, you know, from my perspective, you know, we work all the time with Donald Rencher and Julie Snyder at the city. They're very engaged, and you know, and I think a part of what we want to do is we want to partner, you know, with the local government and with the you know, the communities, the local communities, to really get down to what are those specific needs. And like when Linda comes to us with a development, you know, like our question should be, how do we help get that done? Not be telling her, you know, how to, because those are the groups that really know, you know, what are the needs and how do they make that happen. So that, from our perspective, I think that's what we're, you know, trying to do as an agency, and recognizing that, you know, even as we focus, you know, as much resources, and I think we are focusing more resources towards trying to meet the need, there's still a lot of need that exists there. There's still a lot of demand for it. So, you know, trying to just, you know, do as much as we can to help fill that.
Absolutely. So, yeah. Brother Allah Young, what you want is not different, so much different than what folk throughout the city, region, state want, right?
True.
Talk to me.
Well, first of all, she spoke volumes when she says it's essential to hear from the people that have been on the street and in the shelters. That we have a conversation too.
Sure. Yeah.
Because we strive to, you know, do better. In order to do better, your voice has to be heard. There are three things that stand out. People want to be part of something. They want to be seen, be heard, and be part of something. That's all of us. You know. Yeah. So it's important that you pay attention to those and listen to those people who have those experiences in real time.
Yeah.
They give you the truth about their experiences. You can take from that with your professionalism, you know, and link it up.
Yeah.
In the circle. All those in the middle of the circle strive for excellence.
No doubt.
And that's how you get that done, in my perspective. And I've been in both places. I've been on both sides of the fence.
No doubt.
So I speak directly to experience. She does an outstanding job.
Right.
I mean, people where they are. When she says that, she does it.
Let's have Ms. Linda Little, President and CEO of Neighborhood Services Organization, close out this segment for us. What are we talking about here?
Well, first I want to thank, you know, my wonderful panelists for being here today and answering the call on such short notice, and the City of Detroit, our Lieutenant Governor, for being such great partners, and Pastor Flowers for allowing us to be here today, because this was a very important conversation. But I want to specifically call on our corporations, health systems, the drivers of our economy in Detroit to come together and help us, because we need everybody to create solutions here. This isn't a MISHTA problem. It's not a state Senate problem. It's not the governor's problem. This is our problem, all of us collectively. And so when you're getting the feedback from the community, includes constituents. Reach out to us. I'd be happy to host a forum. When you're talking to corporations and you're in the rooms meeting with folks, tell them about this issue. Let's bring everybody to the table. And this is one of many series to come on this topic, because the next part of this conversation has to be geared toward solution development. Mm-hmm. What are we going to do to fix it? Because Absolutely. We are on the brink of a housing crisis and we need solutions from everyone. So let's come together, let's roll up our sleeves, let's get it done, let's engage the people that are impacted by this, so that we can really make a difference.
We viewed this as being a microphone or megaphone for folks whose voices have not been heard. And I know people will say, well, what is the solution? We're gonna have a summit. We're gonna talk about these things. We're gonna bring experts from across the state, from across the country together this summer to come up with not a concrete plan and something that's gonna go on the wall. We're going to start working on real solutions that we can execute today. Because over the past 4 years, we've talked in a very real terms about more permanent supported housing. And so we're building more permanent supported housing. But we've also got to find ways to finance and fund the development for projects in communities that are done by people who look like those neighborhoods, that are representative, and that are moving forward. Because this is not some problem that we're going to solve overnight, but it is not something that we can wait till tomorrow to fix. So I'm very excited about you joining us and about the important work that we are going to do together, because this is not some problem that can wait for next year or next month. It is not some project that has a silver bullet. It requires every single one of us listening to people who need housing and responding every day on solutions that get them closer to being housed daily as we look for long-term solutions.
We deliver holistic services and wraparound and safety net services to those populations. That includes children, seniors, and individuals experiencing homelessness.
What they're doing is they're giving everybody a chance to try to improve themselves with schooling, educational stuff like that, job search, transportation to go to and from if you need medical and stuff like that. I'm going to school now, and I'm trying to become an instructor. If it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't even had those chances.
NSO is extremely committed to ending homelessness in our community, but it takes more than just a commitment in order to make that happen. Mm-hmm. It really takes understanding each and every client's individual needs and really getting to the root cause of the homeless situation itself. So that's why it's going to take our whole community to really focus in and listen and hear what the people are saying, because it's not just one thing. It's so many factors. And it's even now including like our working class, which is a newer phenomenon.
Although that we are being helped by the NSO and programs like the NSO, I still find it difficult. I do work and have found employment through the help of the NSO, but it is still very difficult trying to find affordable housing, because I was born and raised over on the north end of Detroit, like the senator. Went to Brightmeyer Sherrod in Northern High School, so I spent a lot of time in this city, in this neighborhood. But there are extreme hardships going on for people like myself.
Some of the solution is more collaboration between and among units of government. So we really need the state of Michigan and through MISHTA and the city of Detroit or other local units of government to work collaboratively to find solutions and to make those seamless solutions so that we don't have competing efforts on creating affordable housing. And we're seeing some of that. I just closed on a major transaction in Pontiac where there was involvement from the city, the county, and the state and HUD that made that project happen. And I think that's part of the solution, is making sure that governments figure out how to collaborate and how to work together to provide resources and to find the solutions and to break down some of the barriers that are there.
Pancakes and Politics is brought to you by PNC Bank, General Motors, and the Knight Foundation. Presenting partner, Business Leaders for Michigan. Platinum Partners, Walker Miller Energy Services, Rocket Mortgage, Signal Restoration Services, and DTE. A Real Times Media production.